Good morning and welcome to this new edition of The Compass, which is usually a written product of CPI, but we're here trying something new. Just a reminder that the House and Senate are out of session due to August recess, so I thought we'd try something a little different. As you may have heard, the census has been in the news with the president talking about potentially redoing or changing some of the technical aspects of it. And with words like differential privacy and apportionment, I thought it might be interesting to do this on video. So with me today, I have Eric Teetsel, who's the CEO of the Center for Renewing America, and Wade Miller, who's a senior advisor here to talk about it. Thanks for joining me on this first video issue of The Compass. Eric, I thought I'd start with you. Help us make sense of this. Where are we currently at? What is the issue? There's been talk about the president maybe readjusting, redoing, doing a 5-year, something kind of in between. What are the legal authorities? If you could summarize that for the viewers.
Sure, and thanks you. Thanks for the opportunity to do this. You know, this is complicated stuff and can get pretty technical, but from a top line perspective, I have to give full credit to Wade and to some of the other members of the CRA team who saw this coming down the pike months ago and have been working with outside technical experts who can really get into the weeds on what the census is, how it operates, and most importantly, what exactly went wrong in 2020, the many things that went wrong, so that we were in a position to be able to strike while the iron was hot. I'm really proud of the fact that we've been sharing information behind the scenes with trusted friends in the administration and throughout the conservative movement, I think to help influence this conversation, so that last week when the president truthed about needing a new census, I think that was at least in part the result of Wade's hard work and our team, and something that we can now capitalize and build a political coalition around to move the ball forward on an absolutely critical issue. People probably understand that the census happens every 10 years. The Constitution says we're supposed to count everybody, right? So that we know how many people are in America, and then we can do the Electoral College numbers allocated to states based on that count. We do congressional apportionment based on that count. And in the 200 years since the ratification of the Constitution, a whole host of federal programs rely on census data in order to get federal funding, allocate other resources, and so on and so forth. So it's really an important mechanism for our society to function. The problem is, in 2020, it was wrong. And you don't have to take our word for it. You can go to the census website and they will say openly, sorry, we got it wrong. And they'll use different excuses to explain why, but they're very matter of fact about the fact that we now know, thanks to post-census consideration of the data, that it was just blatantly wrong. And readers of the newsletter will be just shocked to learn that it was wrong in a direction that favored the Democratic Party, having been orchestrated under the last presidential regime. Who could have seen it coming? I can't say that we have exactly a smoking gun about any sort of blatant political manipulation of this data, but the simple fact is it accrued to the benefit of the Democratic Party in some significant ways.
Interesting. But you know, Wade, conservatives have kind of been talking about this for a while. There have been technical issues like counting illegal aliens in the census. There have been a whole host of these sort of technical issues that conservatives have been griping about for a while. What are some of the issues that conservatives have been complaining about?
Sure. So you're right. A lot of us have been talking about this for years. In fact, I have a text message from January 14th on before Trump was even in office saying we need to start getting around this because we got some problems coming our way if we don't correct this ahead of time. But you've got an acknowledgement by the census that they miscounted. And get to Eric's point, it's not, we don't have them caught red-handed, but all of the errors, all of them seem to help the left and none of them help the right. And in the era of weaponization of government, where the bureaucracy of it has been weaponized by the left at every level and every area that we are aware of, I'm just not being super charitable here. My assumption is that there's some games here. At the most charitable assessment of this is that they just messed up on a lot of things and got it really wrong in ways that have extreme consequences that all seem to help the left and none of them help the right. And so you've got overcount and miscounts. You've got shuffling of population data around the maps in ways that are not transparent. You have we're not asking citizenship, so there's a lot of outlying concerns around that based on there's all sorts of considerations with regard to funding formulas, federal funding formulas, state funding formulas, county level funding formulas that all use this data, and none of the data is essentially correct, or at least at the block level we know it's highly corrupted, and certainly at the level up it's very corrupted data. And the problem is that so when you run the census, you get the raw data. And let's just assume that the count is perfect. That data is supposed to go to the states and the federal government, and they're supposed to use that. That's called the Tiger file. But what we've seen is that they basically use this algorithm called differential privacy to scramble all the data up, and it moves it around so no one knows if the data is accurate, and if it's not, no one knows to what degree it's inaccurate. So it used to be that you had a process by which cities, states, counties could resolve these problems called a account question resolution. Now with differential privacy in place, we can't even do that. So if a city knows that their data is wrong, they can't even go to the census and say, correct this, because the census will say, if we tell you what the correct answer is, then we could give you some insight into how the algorithm operates. So you have Obama-era bureaucrats operating an algorithm that hides the actual data from everyone except for a few officials at the Census Bureau that have a special clearance. So no one has access to this Tiger file. We have, admittedly, as a design, improper data that then bleeds into a multitude of problems that we can further discuss.
Well, okay, so what are some of the common myths that conservatives would hear from the liberals, and what would be the one or two, and what would be a response to them?
So one of the biggest arguments from the left and why they do this in a charitable treatment of this is that they actually really care about privacy data, and that's 100% all they're concerned about. And so they scramble the data so that your personal information in the census remains private. And that, for some pieces of information, like religious affiliation, I could see an argument why. But a lot of the data that they collect is just open source and public anyways, or FOIable certainly. But a lot of it is that what they're really trying to do, in my opinion, is they're trying to hide characteristic data that they deem as sensitive to their agenda. Citizenship data, population data, where those populations are centered, and even third-party studies by entities that are not right of center have recognized that there seems to be, from the open source version of this, which is not the actual version they're using, but the open source versions that they've gotten their hands on and some of the data sets that they can experiment to understand how this works, has shown that rural areas are disproportionately hit versus metropolitan big cities. And that's without even assessing the illegal citizenship question. So just based on the population data as it appears, they're already moving it around in ways that could be impacting rural areas, which traditionally benefit the right versus the left, and cities, which traditionally benefit the left versus the right. And it's not clear to me that it's actually just 2%. It could be a lot more. And you can have the algorithm that hides characteristic data in some categories at a very small amount, in some areas at a very large amount. So are they moving illegal alien populations around at 40%, 2%, 5%? Literally no one knows, and that's a big transparency problem because no one can really have faith in the apportionment process and the redistricting process if there's a few bureaucrats that only have, and they're the only ones that have access to the actual data, and no one else, not even other people in the federal government, get access to this to know if this is actually true or not. So I think the problem's probably worse than 2%, but we won't know until there's transparency in the process.
Very interesting. So Eric, what are a couple solutions that conservatives have been asking for?
Well, the president truthed that we need a new data based on accurate information. And our assessment of that is what he means is we know the 2020 census was wrong. We know how it was wrong. We should impute correct information back onto the 2020 census so that we don't have to live for a decade in the midst and the reverberations of data that we know was wrong. We should get it right, and we should live in a world of correct information and data. That seems perfectly reasonable. And then moving forward, we need the right leadership, the right bureaucrats at the Census Bureau who are not going to be focused on playing games to protect vulnerable populations or whatever their justifications are, but are focused on doing exactly what the Constitution says we should do. Count the number of people who are here and where they are so that we can act accordingly.
Well, thank you for your expertise and digging into this. Conservatives are broadly concerned, a lot of reasons why, as you guys have outlined here. So we appreciate your time and just want to thank you for joining us.